The Justice Department has agreed to hand over key evidence from Robert Mueller's report to the House Judiciary Committee. Chairman Jerry Nadler announced it today and said as a result, he will pause efforts to hold Attorney General William Barr in criminal contempt. A civil contempt vote is believed to still be set for tomorrow. You will recall Barr had defied a subpoena for testimony and documents related to the investigation into whether the president obstructed justice. This comes as Nadler's committee gets set to hold hearings about the Mueller report. Today's star witness is John Dean, the former White House counsel to President Richard Nixon. His bombshell testimony during Watergate paved the way for Nixon's resignation. Dean is also known as a frequent critic of President Trump's. Last week, Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler said the hearings are meant to examine the findings laid out in the special counsel's report. Last month, Robert Mueller explained his team did not explicitly exonerate President Trump. But he also said his office never considered indicting him because the Justice Department prohibits the prosecution of a sitting president. Furthermore, Mueller said he would not testify about his findings. But today's hearing still got President Trump's attention. Yesterday, he tweeted Mueller's investigation found, quote, no collusion and facts that led to no obstruction. He also called John Dean a, quote, CNN sleazebag attorney and told Democrats to go back to work. Julia Manchester is a political reporter for The Hill. She joins me now from Washington. Welcome, Julia. Great to have you with us. Now,
thank you.
Some of the underlying evidence for the Mueller report will be handed over. So how big of a victory is this for Democrats?
You know, I would say it is quite a victory for Democrats because we know they have been trying to get their hands on any sort of evidence that has been previously redacted in regards to obstruction of justice. We know that special counsel Robert Mueller really punted that issue to House Democrats early last month. So we see it is still a victory for them. However, a deal was struck, so it's not a complete free-for-all for them. And we're going to see this civil contempt vote continue tomorrow. However, the criminal contempt will be put on hold for now.
That's off the table at the moment. All right. So, Julia, the House was set to vote tomorrow to seek the ability to enforce their subpoenas. If the resolution passes, it would, as you mentioned, allow this civil lawsuit on behalf of the House against Attorney General Barr. Does this now indicate, though, because of today's deal with the Justice Department, that this could influence the outcome of that vote tomorrow?
You know, it very well possibly could. I think one thing we have to look at is, you know, it would depend on what kind of information they're getting. And it appears that they will be getting information on obstruction of justice. But like I said, you know, Democrats are vying for any kind of information that could be potentially damaging to President Trump. And we've seen that the Department of Justice has been very defensive of the president under Attorney General Barr. So, you know, the information that they'd be given, you know, we'll really have to wait and see how damaging it really is, because clearly a deal was struck, but we're seeing Democrats kind of hailing this as a bit of a victory, at least for now.
Right. And one thing that they have not been able to do, House Democrats have not been able to get Robert Mueller to testify. But however, they did get John Dean of Watergate fame to speak today. Why do Democrats think his testimony will be helpful to their investigations?
Well, I think John Dean is helpful for Democrats if you look at this purely from a public relations standpoint. And you even saw John Dean say this morning that there were many similarities between President Trump and Richard Nixon in those two investigations, the Watergate investigation and the Russia investigation that we had most recently. So we're seeing some, according to John Dean, similarities. And I think Democrats hope that will help them publicly in terms of, you know, whether they're going to be able to have the public's approval, if you will, to continue on with these various investigations into President Trump in terms of Russia, as well as other aspects of President Trump's life, whether it's other aspects of his administration or his finance or taxes. So we're seeing that it could help in that regard. But in terms of not getting Robert Mueller, you know, it's interesting. I heard some criticism over the weekend that essentially, you know, John Dean is not really involved in this investigation, obviously. And if Democrats wanted to, they in fact that could get Robert Mueller. The reasoning behind that criticism was that Robert Mueller, while he has signaled that he absolutely does not want to testify, he's a former FBI director. He is law-abiding. Many critics would say that the chances of him defying any kind of subpoena to testify would be rather low. So kind of an interesting strategy from Democrats getting John Dean instead of Robert Mueller.
Absolutely. Oh, so Julia, switching gears here for a little bit. Meanwhile, President Trump is defending a deal with Mexico after calling off threats of tariffs last week. Mexico has promised more assistance in keeping migrants from crossing the southern border into the United States. The president says he's not getting enough credit for this deal. But Julia, what exactly is new about what the president has agreed with Mexico?
Well, we're seeing that the immigration requirements in the deal, appear to have been agreed upon with Mexican officials before these recent negotiations took place. We're seeing the new stuff really has to revolve around the number of Mexican National Guard troops at the border and the number, like I said, the number of officials really patrolling the border right now. So we're seeing that's one new part of this. But for the most part, it appears that this deal was something that has been agreed on before and kind of repackaged, if you will, in a public relations move from the administration. But clearly the president is reacting quite animatedly, if you will, to these reports that it's not completely new. And I think the president was hoping that this supposed deal with Mexico could help him with his political base and that he's standing up to Mexico and getting his way when it comes to trade as well as immigration. Those are two top issues for President Trump going into 2020, and he wants to make sure he's fulfilling those promises to his base.
Something else that's new about it, though, isn't that the timeline has been sped up a little bit? I believe in the earlier agreement, they had 90 days to assess whether this was being effective, and now they have 45 days. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the timeline definitely does go in President Trump's favor in that, it does seem to move things along quicker. That could obviously work in his favor in terms of getting this, through and, having these claims settled. But then again, a lot of this deal was negotiated before, and this is very much of a public relations strategy on the part of the White House.
Right. Now, how do lawmakers feel about this, Julia? Is this deal something that they're happy about?
Well, you're seeing varying responses along partisan lines, which is to be expected in Washington. Republicans, many of whom were very critical of President Trump's threat to impose tariffs on Mexico, were praising the deal, saying, President Trump got his way and that tariffs were a good negotiating chip, if you will, in this entire saga. However, Democrats are really coming out against the deal, in particular, President Trump's negotiating strategy. So we saw that Nancy Pelosi criticized him, saying we can't continue to throw temper tantrums if we don't get something done with another country, with an allied country. So seeing a mixed bag of responses, and we obviously Democrats don't want to be seen giving that victory to President Trump yet.
All right, Julia Manchester from The Hill, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.